The Dancing with Wisdom podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Dancing with Wisdom podcast, where we invite you to join us as we make sense of life.
Absolutely. And thank you for everyone who's been following us and writing the messages. We love receiving them. And so we have covered wisdom of the heart, wisdom of the mind. Okay, so wisdom for life. Now, the reason why I wanted to bring this one up, Sunil, is because obviously it's a section within the book. I wouldn't say it's the happiest,
no, it's not.
brightest,
Yeah,
let's go and sing the sound of music on a hill kind of chapter.
It's not.
But it did raise some really, really interesting points. And I've written a few of them down here. So there are so many problems in life. The one that springs to mind straight away, which mentioned all the time, is COVID. So question is, how do we have wisdom within lockdown? That was one thing that pops up, and people have so many different problems in life. So how can everybody be stepping towards, or can they be stepping towards wisdom in the same way? And are we ultimately looking to be gaining wisdom in the same direction? Would suddenly everything be in sync, or are we looking for our own directions?
Yeah. So we're talking about wisdom for life, and we're talking really about how we have very disordered lives. And you're right, that particular chapter in the book is the most negative because it does talk about the struggles that we have. We go from disappointment to fear and dread, maybe even despair, sense of stress, burnout, loneliness, depression. And you take it right to the other extreme, even suicide.
I feel like I need a hug right now.
But unfortunately, that is the world that we live in. And rates of mental illness, rates of anxiety, depression, all those things are increasing around the world. And a large part of that is because we're not walking in wisdom. We're not learning to engage with the reality of life. And there isn't a place to go to for answers to the questions our minds are asking, for the deep emotions that we feel within our hearts. We talked on other podcasts about the death of a good friend of mine, Bunty, who died in 2014, and the impact that had on me. We talked as well about, and just obviously death is something that's very, very relevant in our COVID world. We've talked as well about we have questioning minds and how we're drowning in information, and it's not what information we need. We need something that's much deeper and more meaningful and substantial. And that's why our lives are so often in the mess that we're in, because we're in a broken, fractured world, and we're trying to make sense of that and deal with the consequences of that.
So is wisdom in life, is it being wise in all of the other areas we've covered so far?
Well, they're foundational, certainly. The point being that we need wisdom how to grapple with the brokenness and complexity of the world. And how do we, in a sense, the subtitle of the book is Meaning, Purpose and Fun. How do I find meaning, purpose, and even fun in a world that's so cynical, confusing, complex, and chaotic? And it's become more so through technology. I mean, there's so many great things about technology, but it also means that it's creating, as it were, an environment that's also toxic as well, because it's available 24/7. We are not 24/7 creatures. We need time and space, margin, breaks to engage with the world around us, to have face-to-face relationships rather than social media relationships. We need to be out in nature. We need to be connected with our creator. We need to feel that we're part of a wider community rather than me and my little world.
So when you're coaching, because you coach as well,
and I do coaching as well.
Yeah, you
that's
do coaching
right,
as well.
yes.
So do you find that these questions pop up quite a lot?
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, I've trained as a psychiatrist, and so as a psychiatrist is very much about mental illness and dealing with the brokenness that people deal with. So a lot of those things that are written about in the book, depression, stress, burnout, people who feel suicidal. I know I've dealt with those people and talk with people struggling with those things. I've struggled with some of those things myself. the point being that that's not enough. That's just the negative. How do we go to positive? So as a coach, what we do is using some principles from positive psychology, we look at what are the things that can make people thrive and flourish in life and not just get by. So in a sense, to dance with life, from going from, say, like an anxiety dance or a depressive dance, because we are dancing to some kind of tune. And a lot of the music in our world is actually more like noise, and it produces a horrible dance. It produces all these high rates of mental illness and cynicism and emptiness. And yeah.
Well, it does tie into what we were saying about choosing your entertainment and your music and that wisely.
Yeah.
Earlier on. If you take it in the same kind of context, if you choose wisely, you could be dancing a better tune within your life.
To a much better tune. And so your life can truly begin to flow and to sing in a beautiful way. Yes.
But so we're looking from the negative to the positive.
Absolutely.
All right. But there can be many people who are already in the positive. You see. So where does the wisdom come in here? Because is it a case of, I'm in a good place, I need to be wise and acknowledge that, be grateful for it, so to continue my life, or is it my job to help put that across to other people, in everyday's life? I mean, something walking down the street, people put their heads down, they don't say hello to you. I sometimes do it for fun. I go, hi, like, who are you, strange guy in flares? But what about the other side of things? You're already in a good place.
Yeah, I think what is good, let it expand and grow. So part of wisdom is learning and growing. That's a big part of it as well. And if I have something that's good and I share it with others, then it expands. And then the joy increases as well. So part of wisdom is learning to grow and develop and deepen in that more and more on the positive side. And that's healthy, and that's encouraging. And sure, we live in a world that's got so much sadness and sorrow and suffering and sickness and goodness knows what. Let's see how we can be more of a light in the darkness.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. But I'm just thinking, like, with life, the word life, it's huge. It's huge, just huge,
Yes.
I mean, everyone's life is different. There are different walks of lives.
Yes.
So I feel like, obviously, we as we go along, I'm sure we'll break this down into different circumstances. But life in itself, we need to suddenly strip everyone's circumstances away and try and somehow summarize what life even means.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, particularly in the Western world, we've got amazing resources available to us. Things that our parents, grandparents, great-grandparents could never have dreamed of. We've never had it so good. And yet at the same time, we've never had it so bad in terms of levels of discontentment, mental illness, people questioning what they're doing, people living with destructive habits. And that's why we need wisdom to begin to navigate through that. And that's very much what I'm very passionate about, encouraging people to spend time and share and think about on a deeper level.
Do you think we're in a world-changing moment in our existence? So what I mean is, like, I feel like there is I feel like we can go in one direction, the planet can go in one direction, or it can go in another.
Yes.
And we hear a lot about, say, the environment and things like that, and it gets to the stage where some people go, "Oh, not that again." Where it's such a shame is because it's really, really important, for example. But I feel like there needs to be some kind of wisdom.
Yes.
Because if you're making if you have the wise choice, if you make the wrong choice, we could very fast go in a pretty bad state.
Yeah, you're talking on a sort of global societal level, which is huge. I always think about my favorite teacher, and he had this lovely story about the wheat and the tares, the wheat and the weeds, if you like.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Tell me about it.
Well, the whole point being is that the same environment that creates healthy fruit and healthy growth is the same environment that allows weeds to grow as well. And so I very much believe that we are going to see goodness get brighter, and we're going to see, if you like, the junk and the negativity get darker as well. And I think those two are going to coexist side by side. And the challenge for us
Mm.
is where do we focus our attention? And if enough of us focus our attention on the good, the positive, the wholesome, the life-giving and the life-enriching, then that will, as it were, quench out the darkness and the weeds more and more. But if more and more of us are focusing on the negative, and unfortunately a lot of our society and media is focused on the negative, and that's one of the tragedies, I think, is bad news sells really well. People know that if you put bad news stories up, people are going to get mesmerized by that, and they're going to focus on that, and then they can get more advertising to go to that, and that's how the whole economic model is based. And obviously that's destructive. But I think, and we obviously, it's our individual choices, but enough individuals make those choices to focus on wisdom and on the positive and on the good things of life and on what it means to walk and dance with wisdom, then I think we will get more positive outcomes.
So this is quite interesting. This boils back to something you said a few times, is that when it comes to, you got to ask yourself, what are you doing from a personal level? What are you doing as an individual?
Because you're the only one person you have 100% control. Well, you have 100% influence over is yourself.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the press and the news.
Yes.
And it's just like ghastly, some of it, and it's like, but we need to know what's going on around the world. And I'm like, well, yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. But we need to know what's going on around the world and not just what you're giving us.
Exactly. Yes, that's right.
And
the whole model is based on sending you bad news. I mean, what is it? CNN, constant negative news. Okay. But constant negative news is the business model because they know that's what gets people to pay attention. And unfortunately, I mean, again, my favorite teacher talks about people who talks about his disciples, his followers as sheep. And sheep sound cute and cuddly, but one of the problems with sheep, and we are sheep as well, is that we just tend to follow the crowd. We just tend to do what everybody else is doing,
every time
rather than thinking for ourselves.
Every time my kids go into school, I always say, be the best you. And make your own decisions. Because
you're responsible for them.
Because you're responsible for them, And the thing is, it's like, how can you say I'm making a wise decision when you're doing someone else's decision? And that person may not have a clue if they're making a wise decision.
Absolutely, yes.
So, I find that really, really fascinating. Really fascinating. So, I just find this topic, I'll be honest with you, Sunil, I find this topic really difficult.
Yes.
I find this conversation really difficult because it's just so broad.
Yes,
it's just so broad. It's like wisdom in life. I'm trying. Well, we're all trying, but what is it? I don't get it. How can we at least work towards it?
That's really helpful. That's helpful you say that. I think what I'm trying to get at here as well, I talk, is that we have a lot of negative consequences from a lack of wisdom. And we need to be careful. So I work as a psychiatrist, and mental illness is rising exponentially all over the world. And one of the big pushes for that, and again, in our culture, is that I need a medication. I need a drug to go and fix it. That's what we say to ourselves. And I'm trying to say, actually, it's much more complex than that. Unfortunately, our secular atheistic worldview tries not to look at things in context. It just looks at, basically, what we've conditioned ourselves to say is, I don't feel happy, I don't feel good, I want to get out of this as fast as possible. So, for example, say 200 or 300 years ago, if somebody said that they were feeling down, they were feeling their life didn't have meaning or purpose, and they didn't know where they were going, the question to them would be, well, what else is going on in your life? What's the context you're in? What do you think God, the universe, life is trying to teach you through this? And how can you grow through this experience? Our response today is, let me get you a tablet. Let me get you a pill to fix it, because I want a quick fix. I'm not feeling good at the moment. I want to get out of this bad feeling as fast as possible. And that was brought home to me. I mean, when I first became a psychiatrist many, many years ago in the last century, one of the first patients I saw was this lady who had depression. And I was the junior doctor, the lowest of the low, who had to see this lady. And, we would swap over every 6 months. And so, you quickly go through the notes. We had paper notes in those days, and you'd see what the previous doctors had done. And you would sort of look through that, and then you'd see what medication they were on, and you'd see how they were doing. And I noticed as I was flicking through her notes that she'd been seeing, all the previous psychiatrists, and she'd been on on maximum dose of antidepressant, and they changed it, and then it still was no better. And this has gone on for about 2 or 3 years, and none of the medication at maximum doses was helping, and she was just feeling as depressed as ever. And so I was thinking, So anyway, she came into the room, and I said to her, okay, how's it going and how are things? And she was just as down as ever. She wasn't sleeping well, wasn't having poor appetite, all those things that we're taught to look for. And I was stuck. And one of the things we're taught at medical school is if you're stuck and you don't quite know what to do, review the diagnosis. So I remember I said to her, I've looked at everything here. Is there anything you haven't told us that we need to know about that would help us to help you better? And she looked at me and she said, well, yeah, there is actually. She said, and I'll never forget it. She said, well, actually, I've been having an affair with the man across the road, and his wife doesn't know about it. And it's been going on, I think it was for about 2 years. And in fact, his wife is my best friend, and she's sitting outside in the clinic right now. And I thought, oh my goodness. And as carefully as I could, and as politely as I could, I said, I think the reason you're feeling this way is not to do with medication. I think it's because you're living out of integrity with yourself. And this is what's actually eating you away. And no medication in the world is going to solve this. I mean, I couldn't say it at the time, but what I would say to her now is that actually what you need wisdom, because you really are, literally between a rock and a hard place now. You've made choices, and there are consequences from these choices. And whichever way you go, there's going to be pain. Now, as a disciple of Christ, I know there's forgiveness and love that can get you through this, but you're going to have to face up to these circumstances and the decisions that you've made. And that's where you really need wisdom. I will, well, I discussed, there was a social worker who was also involved, and we discussed it, and she actually didn't come to see me after that. And but he was dealing with her, and we basically acknowledged about what a complex situation, because she had choices, and, we had to obviously preserve the confidentiality, but you're living a lie is what you're doing.
Okay. So the thing that pops up, a question that pops up for me there is, should we be okay with facing the pain? And as we're bringing people up, should we be saying to people, right, don't, because you hear that thing when, you say to like kids and stuff, like, you got to face up to that, you've done wrong, go and say sorry. But then as you get older and stuff, you're trying to, say, oh, that happened. Well, I'll just shut away. I know lots of people, I'm not going to say their names, they know who they are, where they will just avoid conflict. They will not be able to admit that they're wrong. They will not say sorry, they'll try and deal with it another way by being extra nice or something like that. They won't face the fear.
That's exactly right. And that's so natural. I mean, is that when we do things wrong, we want to hide. Okay. Adam and Eve, when they disobeyed God in the garden, they went and hid. Okay. That's in a sense very natural. What I would say though is you got to face up this fact is that pain in life is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Now, what I mean by that is that it is guaranteed you are going to face pain. No doubt about it. No matter what you do in your life, you're going to face pain. There are two kinds of pain. There's acute pain and there's chronic pain. And it's much better to deal with the acute pain and get it over with than deal with the chronic pain and have that nagging over you for the rest of your life.
Which is what that lady was experiencing.
Yes. I mean, the only way I can see is you have to face the acute pain of facing up to what you've done.
I also think facing up to yourself, and also giving forgiveness.
Yes, that's right.
Forgiveness is a big one.
It's a huge one. It's a huge one.
To say, I forgive you. I forgive myself for that. I'm going to press the reset button, and I'm going to do better. Yes. I'm going to not do that anymore.
Well, and the point, exactly. I mean, and again, in my favorite book, it talks about two kinds of sorrow. It talks about worldly sorrow and godly sorrow. And if you think about it, giving an example, say you're running a department and you find out that one of your employees is taking money out of the till, for example, and you confront that employee and they burst into tears in front of you. Now, they obviously look very sorry, but you don't know whether they're crying because they've been caught or they're crying because they genuinely feel sorry for what they've done and they want to change.
Okay.
From what you've seen, you need wisdom to know whether it's worldly sorrow. And what that scripture says in the New Testament in Corinthians, it says, worldly sorrow leads to death, but godly sorrow leads to repentance and life. And that change of mind, that change of attitude, that in a sense recognizes the wrong that I've done and wants to, as it were, move forward. And God's love is there and compassion is there for that.
Well, absolutely. But I'm also just thinking that you can say, well, do you know what? I'm going to forgive you because I think that's what I want to do as a human being, not human doing, a human being.
But you need wisdom there, you see, as well, because if it's worldly sorrow, and you need to distinguish between consequences. So yes, you can forgive, but there is a part of us that demands justice as well.
But then okay. So with justice, I get it. But at the same time, so if you've given that person forgiveness, and let's just say that person has had a pretty bad upbringing and they've never had that before, that person may feel that compassion and go, well, I'm actually being heard for the very, very first time, and go off and lead a better life.
Yes.
Or they might do it again.
Exactly.
Yeah? You get a kick up the bum.
Yes.
And then what you're actually doing is you're saying, well, I'm going to be wise and I'm never going to do that again. I'm going to learn. But then you've been a good person for doing it.
That's right. You need a lot of wisdom there because you need to understand the context. I've just given you the bald facts, but you really need to know the person. You need the context they're doing it. You need to understand what the openness to change is, or is this the 50th time they've done it?
This topic, this wisdom of life, is just conflicting with everything that's saying. I feel like there's something there, but there is a conflicting thought and a conflicting answer, but ultimately, I know what the ultimate feeling is and the ultimate answer, but I just think it's going to be difficult for people, which makes me think that going back to one of the earlier podcasts and what you said is that you have to start. You take that solitude, you start start cleansing yourself and having clear thought. So when you do get into that situation within your life, then you are able to make the best decision that you're capable of doing. Am I on the right lines here?
Yeah, I think, you're certainly on track there. I mean, it's not about, what I want to clear is, it's not about getting everything right. You will make mistakes, but it starts, from that central foundation of my relationship with God. And for me, what that's meant is that I read the biblical scripture every day. I understand how God has worked in different characters in the Bible as I read that through systematically. I understand how I'm accepted and loved because of what Christ has done for me, and that there's nothing more I can do to know God's love and goodness in terms of his acceptance for me. And so I live not for approval, but from approval that I have in Christ. As a young child knows that they're loved by their father, the best possible father,
Quite.
And so that, in a sense, takes the pressure off to get it all right, but to knowing that God is guiding and leading my paths. Yeah.
Okay, that's fantastic. Well, we'll leave it there. Let's do a quick summary of wisdom in life. Just a 60-second summary.
Wow. Okay. Wisdom for life. So what I've already talked about is how we have disordered lives. And that comes because of a lack of wisdom. And we see that in the huge rise of mental illness and general unhappiness in the world. And part of our problem is that we're making happiness our goal, when actually we need to think that life is full of pain and problems, and we need to choose between acute pain or chronic pain. And the good news only makes sense if you understand the bad news first. And wisdom provides a pathway to get through the acute pain and avoid the chronic pain so that you can learn to have meaning, purpose, and even fun in your life. And that's part of what wisdom is promising.
Amazing. Well, again, another topic for us to explore further at a later time. Sunil, how can people get hold of you?
Yeah, you can get more resources at drsunil.com.
And of course, you can get hold of me, Elliot, with 2 L's and 2 T's at monkeynutuk.com with your questions or any discussions that you would like us to explore further. And of course, do tell your friends, share it with your friends. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can leave a nice little message for us, can't they? Hit the subscribe button and the little alert sign, and we will be reading them messages. And if you've got something, do leave your name. It doesn't have to be your real name, and we can address that for you. We'll do our best to get to all of them. And until then, thank you for listening to another episode of Dancing with Wisdom, Making Sense of Life podcast. I'm Elliot Frisbee. And
I'm Sunil Raheja. Yeah.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Great.
See you in the next one.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Dancing with Wisdom podcast, presented by Sunil Raheja and Elliot Frisby. For details on the Dancing with Wisdom book and its accompanying workbook, please visit drsunil.com. If you know someone who would enjoy this podcast, then please share it, give it a thumbs up on YouTube, and help it to grow by giving it a nice review. Life's challenges can diminish, define, or develop you. Which one will it be? Make sure you hunger for the wise one. The choice is yours.